Do you think that it will be that tough to put on a jacket? Let's just cut to the chase. You saw the title of the video, however, I think that further explanation is required. What is a Disco Elysium? What is a Twitter? What do they say about us? So let's, first of all, introduce what is actually my thesis. For my thesis, I chose to discuss the relation between the 2019 video game Disco Elysium and the social platform Twitter. Disco being a personal favorite game that I've grown insanely attached to, and Twitter being a platform I'm still active on for more than 4 years. You might be asking how exactly these two are related, and as we go I'll make sure to further introduce both parties, but what you need to know is that I started my research based on a quote by Disco's lead designer, Robert Kurvitz, in regards to how they chose to represent text in the game, taking direct inspiration from Twitter.
So Twitter was our kind of competition. As a writer, you want to write snappy, fast, involving text, and you want to display it in as good a manner as you can, and then Twitter does it very well. Even if you look at our dialogue system, you can see that it's column shaped. So text is best presented as a column in newspapers and Twitter and everywhere. As you can see, the text tumbles up. So this is also something that Twitter does. We wanted to build a dialogue engine that's as addictive and as snappy as Twitter, which I guess is a strange thing to say for an RPG. Text is really impoverished nowadays. Text seems incredibly boring. Everyone says that they don't want to read, but at the same time, read is almost all they do all day long. Messengers, social media. This is something that people like to do. They like to spend time staring at text and then lie that they took it in, but they actually just, eyes just glazing over.
This not only made me curious about the implication of the UI of both products, but it also made me begin to speculate. Did Disco borrow Twitter's interface only as, a marketing tool just to make a marketable product, or maybe there is more meaning to it? This direct quote from Kurvitz not only, made me begin my actual research, but it already planted an assumption in my head in regards to the fact that I do believe that yes, Disco, through this inspiration, has something to say about this, and there is a meaning hidden between its lines. So, let me take you on this journey that I went on this path of discovery. And before I can answer my actual question, let's start small. What is Disco Elysium? I know that Disco Elysium is a relatively popular game. It won several Game Awards. It's nothing to scoff at. I do understand that it's more of a niche title, so I think that an introduction is required for those who aren't really in the know of what this game is. Disco Elysium is a 2019 video game created by the British-Estonian company Zaum that belongs to the CRPG genre, a genre of role-playing games originally inspired by the tabletop classic Dungeons & Dragons, in which you roleplay as a character with full control over them in an expanded fictional world. Many of the first games in the genre took direct inspiration from D&D, while some being text-based, with Disco taking inspiration from the same classic formula and more modern games within the genre. In Disco, you play as an amnesic, alcoholic, junkie detective, with you as the player getting plopped into the fictional neighborhood of Martinez Revachol to solve a murder mystery. Disco's main gameplay mostly revolves around exploration, conversation, and interaction, with all of these mechanics allowing you progress, but also discovery of your own character and the world he inhabits. In the game, the 24 skills you have, which are reminiscent of skills in D&D, act as voices in your head, providing conversations at any given moment and contributing to your decision making. Like many other games in the genre, Disco Elysium puts its narrative in the forefront, but it also takes extra measures to make it more tied to its mechanics. Every decision you make affects your current narrative. It can come in the form of what kind of words you choose in a conversation, what kind of information you want to focus on more, and what kind of skill you lean towards more in certain situations. This diversion in decision making, which has a lot of flexibility, not only creates a plethora of diverging paths in your story, but also develops your player character in a certain direction that you choose. Also, many, choices that you make in the game, like require you to roll virtual dice, like in D&D, and another diversion to the narrative by creating a scenario of success and failure. There's a main plot. A research I found makes a point about the immense amount of narrative agency you do have in Disco, pointing out its importance and even giving an example on how a simple interaction can lead to many deviating consequences, while also pointing out that even in failure of checks, for example, Disco never stops pushing the narrative forward. Coupled with an interesting retro-futuristic world, interesting and charming characters, amazing voice acting, which, yes, was added to a newer version of the game in 2021, and a beautiful art style and aesthetic, Disco already sounds like a captivating package and a well-made product. But this isn't a review of Disco Elysium. I will not be getting into many details in regards to the actual plot itself. One, because I genuinely believe that you should play the game by yourself, and two, because while I can't guarantee it for 100%, I want to refrain from as many major spoilers as possible. But this isn't where my discussion about Disco ends for this section. Not only that I found more interesting information in regards to its design, there's still the question of the relation to Twitter. According to the clip from the interview that they showed, Twitter was a direct inspiration to how Disco decides to show text. And trust me that it has quite a lot of it, meaning that the choices here are immensely crucial and, according to my findings, are very deliberate. Twitter, without getting into too many details, yet works with text-based posts with a limited amount of characters, forcing the usage of captivating and snappy dialogue, at least in Kurwitz's eyes. It's a feeling that the team in Zelm attempted to replicate, believing it will make their product more marketable, while also providing a rich enough story through easy-to-digest dialogues. Twitter's column-shaped timelines also make text much more readable, something Disco took note after as well. However, the game implements more hooks to make the text more captivating through its content. The constant repeating of certain phrases, especially while your skills converse with you, giving you multiple perspectives, creates an echo chamber of information that provides a more clear understanding of each situation you get yourself in contrast to the modern approach of writing, which Kurwitz believes is too convoluted and unapproachable. Other choices are more on the emotional level, also inspired by social media. The Disco team decided to make most of the dialogues insanely aggressive towards the player, trying to provoke them in any sense, and that's under the psychological nature of us reacting more to negative stuff rather than positive stuff. But Disco isn't this, constant barrage of negativity, and it actually uses Twitter's snappy characteristic to make, honestly, genuinely funny moments.
These manly men are playing balls. This is a ball game.
Kuno doesn't fucking care.
Everyone is a whore. Everyone is a whore. What does that even mean?
While some might think that, because of this approach, Disco might be too depressing or cynical, but as a matter of fact, actually, I've seen a lot of people praise Disco's humorous dialogue, and I can vouch for that as someone who really enjoyed the game. It's clear from the interview that Kurwitz and his team's intentions were good. They wanted to create a marketable and approachable product, which I gotta say they achieved with flying colors. Again, Game Awards winner, absolutely nothing to scoff at. So now we have this broad picture of Disco Elysium, and especially of how it presents texts. And as you saw already, I already brought some pretty intentional inspirations from Twitter. But this isn't enough for me. I'm not here to look for design choice. And although it's a smart design choice that I really like, I want to dig deeper. I want to find further meaning. And for that, I feel like I need to go and deviate to the original inspiration. So, let us leave the mysterious landscapes of Elysium and let us journey to the Wild West of social media. So, here's a small disclaimer, tangent. Just like this isn't a review of Disco Elysium, this right here isn't an overview of current Twitter. Mostly because, researching social media is a bit of a hassle, especially that it constantly changes. And I do want to take into account the fact that Disco Elysium was released in a certain time frame. While originally I actually used a case study and some information from interviews that I conducted in regards to the post-Elon Musk era of the platform, honestly, at this point, I'm keeping him on my wall only because I find it funny. And, I did understand as I went on that, most of this information is irrelevant, and what I really want to focus on is, what actually built Twitter and its basic components and what keeps it going. So, let's talk about hell. As slightly established before, Twitter, now known as X, but I'll keep calling it Twitter, I will not succumb, is a social media platform created in 2006 which is based on microblogging, using posts with a limit of 280 characters similar to an SMS. Certain features like the @ and hashtag made the communication much easier and approachable, allowing users to easily contact other users and form discussion and communities over different topics. Social media platforms, which are now inseparable from our day-to-day life, have also been criticized for affecting us all when it comes to our attention spans, something I thought Kurvitz implied from his interview with GameSpot, and honestly, it's a pretty general and popular take.
Well, Mark, it may be one of the best or worst inventions of our time, depending on who you ask, but everything you could ever need is right here at your fingertips with your smartphone. And if you don't like what you see when you're browsing around, well, just hit refresh and start looking again.
I think that a lot of people recognize that we have shorter attention spans, but we don't really know when that started. So I think that that's a great question.
All right, congratulations. If you've made it this far, you have a better attention span than a goldfish. But goldfish also don't have things like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, providing instantaneous and condensed information at lightning speed.
While I believe the phrasing in this clip is a little bit too insulting, it does still, bring in the point that our attention span is completely ruined due to the immense amount of data that we receive from a lot of social media websites. I also found an article by a user named Yoshi on the Medium website that does address this, but also goes further into explaining what makes Twitter's UI in particular very addictive. Referring once again to Twitter's column shape, the article describes how it allows the timeline of posts to be more predictable, giving the user more choice and control over the flow of information they get and what they want to read into more, either based on a brief observation and what you choose to concentrate on by scrolling, the ability to easily ignore unwanted content, and the fact that enough data about the post's creators is displayed on the timeline, giving enough of an impression of how likable or trustworthy they are. According to interviews I conducted, many seem to share this view of training the algorithm to appeal to you and approaching other users on the platform. This led me to believe that what drives Twitter isn't just some, carefully designed algorithm, which I will touch upon soon, but also the human nature of its users. Now, one of the papers that I've used for my research was written by a man named Cody Baker, and this paper in particular gave me a lot of, idea on how Twitter actually works. I will be mostly referencing this one in particular in this section. Baker concludes that one of the most contributing features to the way people communicate on Twitter is the retweet, now named repost, which allows you to comment on a person's post while also resharing it on your timeline and still giving them credit. Baker further explains that this contributes to what is called a dialogic loop, a loop of constant conversing and commenting between people that is further amplified by retweeting, bringing certain topics from one circle to another, and it's one of the distinctive things that allowed social media, in this case Twitter in particular, to create an engaging environment for users to further interact and share. In regards to a more personal human factor, there's also the tendency to create online personas. Now, the internet is an anonymous space, and while most people are more careful in how they decide to conduct themselves, it does give an opportunity for, more quirky online personalities to thrive using, shticks and gimmicks, and it creates further discussion and communion. The writer Nick Douglas touches upon this further in a much older presentation, which does hold up in a sense today, further explaining the increased entertainment and engagement value from internet personas on Twitter.
Some of my favorite jokes in here have all come from people who are writing characters, basically. There's one account called Shit My Dad Says. This guy has been collecting things that his dad, who's now 78 and 70-something, and the guy's 28 and living with his parents, and he's been collecting what his dad has been saying in notebooks. You could just read him when he comes across in your whole stream, or you can go and dive in and start reading all the things that he's written by his dad. And if you look at them, you start to see this whole character emerge. Sure, each one is funny in its own way, but they become great because they're this whole picture of this grumpy old man. There are a few other accounts that are also like that.
Now, not all of this is sunshine and rainbows, unfortunately. Just like Kurvitz said, and due to a general consensus about social media, it has its ugly side, and Twitter is no exception. Whenever there's a space, there will always be some rotten apples. And even according to some people that I've interviewed, they were exposed to some unwanted and unpleasant content and creators, even after the filtering they do to their personal algorithm. A research and overview of social media by Kay Kender agrees with this as well, with Kender sharing some common negative consensuses regarding Twitter. However, Kender goes out of their way to also explain that the toxic environment is mostly individual or community based, and can't be really labeled as something general regarding the entire platform, and further sells the point that Twitter is a space defined by its users, no matter what corner of it, further showing basis of its human nature. To further, show how much of a powerful communicational tool Twitter is, we don't need to look only just at the individual's experience, but also understand how advertisers use Twitter for their advantage. Baker's paper is actually originally about analyzing how advertisers utilize Twitter, specifically focusing on Wendy's profile, by creating a charming persona that uses pop culture humor and interacts frequently with other brands and consumers in a casual manner, taking advantage of the human nature of communication, a practice I can vouch for that is used a lot across the platform. Another research I found focuses in detail on how news articles get more popularity on social media, not only in the first hours of publishing like it's expected of internet fame, but also that it stays relevant for a longer time. Many news stations online, according to this paper, started utilizing the peer system of sharing information on social platforms, which proved to be more successful than traditional publishing means and simple internet searches. I do hope that all of these points really show how truly big Twitter is and how much of a multifaceted communicational tool it is. It brings so many people from around the globe together, whether they're, individuals, communities, or full-on companies. But there is some, questions that they need to answer, in regards to the relation to Disco Elysium. And I do feel like the mystery still remains. Or maybe the answer was in plain sight the whole time. In an interview with VG247, Kurvitz talks further about the nature of some of the mechanics in Disco. While I already covered most of them, there's one I left out specifically for this section, the Thought Cabinet. The Thought Cabinet is basically an inventory for ideas. During some of your conversations, a prompt will pop up, allowing you to gain a thought that you can keep. That changes some of your stats permanently. In his interview with GameSpot, Kurvitz mentioned the Thought Cabinet and how initially it was tough to implement, but his team kept pushing for it to provide a rewarding mechanic. Something that originally wasn't even considered, yet ultimately elevates the entire experience. How does the Thought Cabinet come so much into play? Well, the context provided by the VG247 interview really shows us why. Kurvitz described that his team's intention was to provide the experience of the human animal, an animal burdened by abstract thoughts that cloud its mind, getting in the way of its life and pulling at its strings. This is achieved by the aggressive nature of Disco's content, especially by your conversations with your skills. And this is where the Thought Cabinet comes in as a hopeful symbol. It provides compensation and clarity in Disco's confusing, changing world, giving control and peace in a void of racing thoughts and opinions, allowing you to leave a lasting impression. Kurvitz himself ends the article by saying, "It's not only torturous to think, to be the kind of animals us humans are. It is also an absolute pleasure and a privilege." And this is where it clicked. You know, the constant communication as if it was a loop, creating your persona, choosing how to conduct yourself and with what kind of content you're going to engage, all in a chance of creating, something compelling and fun. It all sounds insanely similar to the social experience in Twitter. And this is where my personal conclusion comes in. I don't think it's that far-fetched. All of this shows me that the similarities between Disco and Twitter don't just remain on the surface level. No, there is a core component that is almost identical to both products, and that's the human experience. Disco's story and mechanics are about the human experience. Twitter's design and functions revolve around the human experience. Both of them are sides of the same coin, one being external, the other being internal. And only one of these sides is capable to tell a finite story. Now I have my conclusive points in regards to what kind of story Disco is trying to tell about us using the inspiration from Twitter. And not only do I think that it gives my points further basis, I also think that it elevates them. And I genuinely look at Disco, an experience that is very near and dear to my heart, with a new perspective. And I genuinely think it's beautiful. So I'm going to ask the same question once again. What is Disco Elysium? Disco Elysium is a story about a lost man in a new world. It's a story about exploring and discovering, forging a path to understanding new things about yourself and the ones around you. It's a story about forming opinions, making decisions, and meeting new ideas. It's a story about the burden of being human, yet it also decides to show how fun and enlightening it is. It's a story about staying true to yourself and yearning to be part of something bigger. It's a story about making sense and finding meaning. It's a story about us as individuals and a society. And it's a story about one of mankind's greatest desires, a desire that pushes us forward, that allows us to grow, change, and innovate. Disco Elysium is a story about connection.